Hello, my name is Tim Piotrowski, and I'm Social Media and Content Manager at ASCM. We're so glad you've joined us for this discussion today on how companies can use ASCM's Open Access Score Digital Standard and Digital Capabilities model. We have Peter Bolstorff, Executive Vice President of Corporate Development at ASCM, and Douglas Kent, Executive Vice President of Strategy and Alliances at ASCM. And they're here to lead today's discussion. They'll also preview their session at next week's ASCM Connect annual conference. So if you haven't registered, there's still time. And I'll be sure to include a link in the chat afterwards. So take it away, Peter, and I'm going to share the screen.
Thanks, Tim. So again, Peter Bolstorff, and for all of you that know Douglas and I, we're going to call this rather a discussion. We're going to call it our banter. So, and again, Douglas, like Madonna, only needs one name. So welcome, Douglas.
Thank you, Peter.
Sure. So, everybody who's seen this chart or this graphic, kind of understands that SCORE has been around since 1996. Over 5,000 companies have used it to really engineer their supply chains. Even now, it's kind of like oxygen. You go back into some of the companies, and you can still see legacy, plan, source, make, deliver, and return. Douglas, for the first question, what still works? So I've seen SCORE is dead, SCORE is not alive, SCORE is ancient history. And again, I'm going to disagree with some of that, but would love your insights on, what still works.
Well, great. Well, certainly not dead, that's for sure. So that's the good news. So the great news is as you referenced, Peter, supply chain is really ripe for transformation right now. So companies have traditionally used the SCORE model for organizational construct, but beyond that, really establishing their supply chain operating model, and SCORE supports that. It builds that common language between functions. It helps companies really understand and break down and diagnose how the supply chain is performing. It gives great insights relative to best practices, et cetera. So that's all great. However, the speed of the need for transformation is really driving us towards this reconstruction of the model to try to meet up with that need.
Right. And I've had some conversations of late, and we'll get to this here in a minute, but the idea is SCORE in any version, Douglas, will help you get to that mid zone of maturity, right? And I know some of you out there, have gone through the Gartner DDBN and you've gone through that maturity. And I can say with confidence and experience that even thinking in a linear fashion, just like this, SCORE is still useful. It is still one of those things that becomes that foundational architecture around that one. So again, end to end. The one thing I will say when we start to think about sustainability, because again, that's a topic that we know is emerging in the same scope as digital transformation. Again, this idea around sustainability is innovation. I think what I'm observing is it's pushing the boundaries to the right and to the left. Would love your thoughts, Douglas, on that.
I mean, end to end, as we've always said, from suppliers to customer, right? So when we look at the multitude of disruptions that are happening today, right? What scares people, and it should, is that we're getting caught out and risks are coming to us because of what we can't see, what we don't know. And oftentimes that is that enterprise view. That is the, what we don't know about what's happening with our suppliers or our suppliers, or what's happening relative to, in these days, transportation is a huge, issue. So getting that not only getting yourself organized in terms of really understanding and diagnosing your internal processes, those within your four walls. Yes, SCORE is applicable for that. But as we extend that out into the entire ecosystem, from suppliers to customers, it really gives us that transparency and alignment that's necessary to attack back on the disruption, right? That's going to be key. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about, the need for resiliency, but I don't have to remind anybody that the need for resiliency has never been greater.
And then one other thing is, I always get a lot of conversation around, well, my industry, we're a little bit different. And, I'm just going to play the BS card on that one, right? So this works for retail. This works for, automotive. This works for, electronics. This works for, any industry. Yes, and we think about, aerospace and defense, or you think about, government, kinds of things. You got to change maybe, make to maintain, got it. But the idea here is every industry, can represent themselves somewhere on this chart. Thoughts, Douglas, before we move on to the next slide?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what we built with the SCORE model and the next version, right? And in particular, as we'll talk about, Peter, is today's a great day, right? Because we're announcing open access to the standards. So any collective group of companies in an industry sector can feel free to extend the model down to level 4 and level 5, which is specific to their sector, right? So a collection of companies within an ecosystem, companies that participate in the same industry sector, et cetera, can then tailor the model for those specifics. And I think that's the great thing about it is if you try to build a model that satisfies everybody, as we well know, going back to 1997, that's a killer, right? But if you build a model which is extendable to make it completely applicable to any industry sector and keep the model agnostic, that's the winning formula. So I don't expect any of that will change, even with the forthcoming new version.
Great. So Tim, if you can advance to the next slide. So again, this next slide are for those folks who have used the model, right? So it's one thing to have a standard and, it's like the noun. The question is how do you make SCORE a verb, right? How do you use it? And again, we're looking forward to sharing, our transformation learning programs. But this chart took, essentially 12 years to build. And again, let me give you the key part here is when you look at 90 SCORE-based transformation programs, the list on the left are those what I would call common thematic strategic focus areas. The cool thing about a longitudinal study is you can gauge impact, of the particular strategic focus area. But more importantly, you can look at the metric, one of the SCORE metrics, and you can say, what are those strategic focus areas that are the biggest impact, as you move forward across, a 12-year time span. So Douglas, one of the questions that people ask me is, I would have expected ERP and advanced planning system utilization to have more impact. And my thought there is, doing one of these things in isolation doesn't give you the impact as if you start to think about grouping them together, right? And so I'd love your insight on, again, both of us have done well over 500 projects, in the last 20 years around using this one. Would love your insights around that comment.
Well, you just aged us, Peter. So
we started in kindergarten together, right? I mean, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why we get the veteran tag placed behind our name, right? But you're exactly right. So, I mean, when you think about this, whether you look at it from an impact or you look at it from the perspective of what's motivating you to do a project where SCORE-based transformation is the heart of it. But you're exactly right. ERP and if you think about probably, why that doesn't rise higher to the list is because really that's the technology enabler, right? What you're really doing here, and if you look at the collective list of these impacts, you're really transforming the underlying operating model of a supply chain. And it's going to manifest itself differently in terms of impact, also depending on where your starting position is, right? So not all companies enter the game at the same level of maturity. I think what's interesting here is that it's both quantitative and qualitative to some degree. But the reality of it is it's typically you're going to get a multiple set of benefits, right? There's going to be multiple areas that are impacted when you do this. And again, score is just the tool that helps with that. But once you understand the basics of score, you're really learning how to diagnose a supply chain such that it can be transformed. And that transformation, which is great, is not based on emotion, right? It's based on a factual diagnosis, a true deep dive in performance, a realistic assessment about what's working and not working. So when you remove the emotion out of it, the likelihood that you can speed up that path to impact is going to be that much greater.
So one of the things that we know, just based on our own research in resilience, is that, if you think about these strategic focus areas, companies have been, I'll call it the leaders versus laggards. The leaders have been working on this for years, right? And so the idea is, one of the interesting things is even leaders sometimes look back and say, gosh, I'm only using 30% of the technology that I bought 5 years ago. And so the message I want to give everybody here is that by using score in any version, you're going to be able to get, yourself positioned so that you have a standard way of doing your supply chain so that you can focus on those few innovations that we're going to talk about in a minute, that will actually add business value. Because again, there's, almost millions of different technology platforms that you could invest in today. The question is what is the right one? So Douglas, let's move to the big finish here, right? So for those of you that are ESPN watchers, we're going to go to the big finish. So if you go to the next slide, Tim, so again, Douglas and I, again, there's a phrase that we use, we literally are score geeks. We've both been around the model since 1.0 and since its inception. And again, it's one of those things where, it becomes second nature to us, right, over time. So one of the things that we're so excited about, and this really launched from a task force that we initiated several years ago, is this idea around digital capabilities. We knew 3 years ago that score needed to be able to reference, a different perspective, a more asynchronous supply network point of view. In working with Deloitte, we launched the DCM model, the digital capabilities model, but we connected the two. Douglas, would love your insights on, again, what's missing in score, A, and then B, as we move forward in time and we want to represent that through 2030, what are the exciting things that you're looking forward to as we launch this new task force?
Yeah. So as a self-declared geek, I have never been more excited. This is going to be game changing.
Yeah.
I mean, really, all of us who have been around and used the model, et cetera, and are critics of the model. We're both, it's the best thing that there is, but we always feel as geeks it can always get better. Right. And the integration ideas that we have from our various frameworks right now makes this transformation of the score model, this score for 2030, if you will, is going to be, it's the biggest technical lift in the model that we've seen since inception. So as you mentioned, the collaboration with Deloitte in the digital capabilities model allows us to rethink the boundaries of score, because as you can see here, we can line up synchronized planning with plan or dynamic fulfillment with deliver, etc. But what you also see here is connected customer and product development. This takes us back to the original frameworks of D-Core and C-Core, the right. Customer chain model and the design chain model. And that allows us to properly extend the score model for those connectivity points from product and to customer. That's right. So that insertion of the digital capabilities into the process structure, the extension of the model to include all those necessary product lifecycle management components and design components, as well as the connection with the customer, makes this model, this uplift, the technical uplift of this model, geek happy, let's say, right? And the other great thing, which again, I'm super excited, as I know you are, Peter, is the ability to also integrate our enterprise certification for sustainability standards. Sustainability is so critical and so aspirational for companies. And today it's underrepresented, right? And we feel that, and we know that's not right. So those key pillars of that sustainability certification, which includes, of course, the economic responsibilities to stakeholders, but the triple bottom line is also inclusive of the ecological and the ethical pieces. And bringing those into the model, just combined with digital capabilities and the model extension, boy, I'm totally geeking out on this. We launched the technical teams starting this week, and we opened up the standards of SCORE this week. We're announcing this new version, as you state here, with the targeted release date of June 2022. There's nothing more exciting in supply chain right now than what's going to happen with this model.
So I want to double click a little bit on the right hand, right? So there are some things that are fundamentally different. So if you think about SCORE as a process hierarchy, you've got 3 levels of process detail and those kind of things. Those things are going to stay around, right? The idea with the digital capabilities model is it's really about digital capabilities. It's not a process model. It's really about, what are those digital capabilities that are really going to enable your business to flow. 80% of the people that use DCM today, and again, that's like a hockey stick in terms of people who are using that one, are really focusing on just one of the capabilities based on what business challenges they're trying to solve. And so when somebody says, do I use DCM or do I use SCORE? I'm saying yes, use them both, right? We use them both. And so again, not only is SCORE now open access, DCM is open access, our sustainability standard is open access. And again, I think for those of you out there, our approach to redesigning or rethinking or reimagining SCORE through 2030, again, structurally, we have a core team. We're going to be engaging corporate adoption users. And again, when we look at our own our corporate members, again, and certainly there is also going to be a crowdsourcing component to this. Absolutely. And we've never done that before. And so when we think about getting engaged around, how do I stay tuned? How do I engage or how do I participate in this? Just know that there's going to be a crowdsourcing component that again is going to make it that much more relevant to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's critical, Peter, because as you mentioned, we've never really done that. So what I love about the crowdsourcing is yes, if you want to stay updated on where the model direction is, you can stay updated. If you want to give a point of view, share your subject matter expertise, you get the opportunity to do that. The great thing about it is it only makes the model better, right? So knowing what we're doing in terms of the overall construct of the model and the integration of the various frameworks, the open sourcing of everything, the inclusion of subject matter experts from a crowdsourcing perspective. I mean, really, there's just, it is a very, very exciting proposition. And we've really accelerated this development for the release for June, not just because we're SCORE geeks, right? But because it is in such demand, right? Really, it's the C-suite can't stop talking about how we need to transform the supply chain, and transformation. The SCORE model is at the heart of that transformation.
And the one other thing I wanted to say out there for those of you that need a more formal, the other thing that we're putting in the ingredient box as we shake this up is the idea of actually literally making it an ISO standard. And I think the opportunity for us to put this forward and to actually make it an ISO standard is also something we haven't contemplated before. And again, excited about that aspect of it. So Douglas, last words. Any last words?
Yeah, so I guess the point is don't just be a passive participant. Get yourself engaged. There's more information coming. Again, the strength of the model is so heavily dependent on the subject matter expertise of those who have joined us today, and it's that strength really comes from you. We'll be shepherding the development. We will leave the new model as well as the existing components of DCM and the current version of the model as open source. But get engaged. Join the rest. Join these two geeks at least in being a participant. And I'm really happy that you'll do so. Great.
And again, for those of you who are on, so open access is a big deal, right? We've gone as the APIX has acquired the Supply Chain Council. It became a member's benefit. We are now making this open access. We're sharing this whole journey, with the world. So, Tim, I'm guessing there's going to be ways that people can learn more about how do I actually gain access? How do I get an ASCM account so that I can actually then click in to see the models? Again, Tim, I'm going back to you.
Yes, and we'll be directing people to the ASCM community as well.
Okay, great. So, Tim, I know we're on a live thing, and I can keep talking. Douglas and I can both keep talking. So you're going to have to give me a window of when do I stop talking.
All right. Well, if you're ready to wrap up, I could take us out, but I don't know if you have any last words.
My last word is the same as Douglas. Get involved, get your account set up, see what we have to offer in the SCORE digital standard today and what DCM looks like and the enterprise standards, and let's gear up for an amazing fast-paced launch.
And you don't have to wait till 2022 to get started, right? So the model is existing today. You need transformation today, so don't wait till then, but help us create the next version.
Yep.
Great.
Cheers, Tim.
Well, great. Thank you, Peter and Douglas, for sharing your insight today. And as a reminder, Peter and Douglas will be joined by Chris Richard from Deloitte next Tuesday for the Rebuilding SCORE for 2030 session, which is just one of many exciting sessions at ASCM Connect annual conference. And you can still register and use the promo code Last Chance for $50 off. And so thank you again for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you next week at the ASCM Connect annual conference. Take care.
Yep. See you then.
See you guys.